Imagine watching the person who completely destroyed your reputation get this massive, highly public promotion.
Oh, man, yeah. That is the worst.
Right. While you were forced to just quietly step down in disgrace. I mean, your blood boils, your chest tightens.
You're just furious.
Exactly. And you've kept the receipts, you have the emails, you have the actual power to ruin them right back.
Yeah, the temptation is huge.
Now imagine a king, a man who has literally killed giants and led armies, looking at you in that exact white-hot moment and commanding, drop your weapon.
Wow, that's powerful.
Welcome to Reformed Thinking. I want to speak directly to you, the listener, about our mission for today's deep dive.
Yeah, because we really need to set the stage here.
We do, because we are living in an era that is just absolutely saturated with perpetual outrage. I mean, it is the water we swim in.
Oh, totally. It's everywhere.
If you pull out your phone right now and scroll for just 60 seconds, you are going to encounter it. Anger is meticulously marketed to us.
And monetized.
Yes, monetized by algorithms that are literally designed to keep our heart rates elevated.
It's basically a business model at this point.
Exactly. And culturally, we've reached a point where chronic outrage is often praised as a virtue, like it's worn as a badge of honor.
Right, like if you're not angry, you don't care about justice.
That's the exact mindset.
Yeah.
But today, we are cutting through that modern noise by examining an ancient royal decree. We are taking a massive, intensive look at Psalm 37, specifically verse 8.
Which is such a short verse, but so heavy.
It really is. The text simply says, "Cease from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself in any wise to do evil."
Man, that hits hard.
It does. And our guides for this deep dive are two incredibly dense, extensive exegetical and theological commentaries that dedicate themselves entirely to unpacking this single, solitary verse.
Just one verse. It's amazing how much depth is there.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because reading through this material, it becomes immediately apparent that we aren't just looking at, an ancient version of a stress ball.
Right. Or like some coping mechanism for a bad Tuesday at the office.
Yeah, exactly. So where do these commentaries even start?
Well, the commentators make this brilliant and honestly kind of terrifying assertion right out of the gate.
Okay, I'm listening.
They say that holding on to anger, nurturing that invisible internal fire, it's not just a psychological quirk.
And what is it?
It is an act of practical unbelief. It's a profound systemic failure to trust the providence of God.
Wow. Practical unbelief. That phrase literally stopped me in my tracks when I read it.
Because it exposes us, right?
It really does. Because it means, I can recite all the right creeds, I can attend the right church, I can intellectually assent to the idea that God governs the universe.
Yeah, on paper, you're solid.
Right. But the moment my blood starts boiling over a perceived injustice, my nervous system is basically screaming that God is asleep at the wheel.
And that you have to take control right now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. The premise here is that when we refuse to let go of our wrath, we are inevitably, unavoidably steering ourselves toward doing evil.
This really isn't about therapeutic emotional regulation. It's about spiritual survival.
It is. And to really grasp the weight of this, we need to understand the crucible that forged this command. We have to look at the author.
Because context is everything here.
Absolutely. Because, it is incredibly easy to read a phrase like, cease from anger, slap it on a bumper sticker, and just dismiss it as naive, sheltered advice.
Like it was written by someone who's never had a hard day in their life.
Right. If some guru who has spent their entire life in a quiet monastery tells me not to be angry, I might honestly just roll my eyes.
Sure, because what do they know about real conflict?
Exactly. But the historical reality of King David shatters that completely.
Oh, completely. The internal evidence of the psalm itself places us in a very specific phase of David's life.
Yeah, verse 25, right.
Yeah, he explicitly writes, "I have been young and now am old." So we are hearing the raspy, battle-tested voice of an aged monarch in his twilight years.
This isn't a young idealist writing poetry in a field.
Not at all. This is the mature fruit of a lifetime spent navigating the most brutal realities of human existence.
And he went through a lot. Assassination attempts.
Severe political betrayals, military coups, agonizing personal afflictions. He is not writing from an ivory tower of theoretical theology.
Let's put some flesh on those trials for the listener, because the commentators meticulously detail David's biography to prove just how much right he had to be angry.
Oh, humanly speaking, he had every right to burn everything down.
Let's start with King Saul. David was the model citizen. He played the harp to soothe the king's madness.
He was literally the guy trying to help him.
Right. He risked his life on the front lines against the Philistines. He was utterly loyal. And in return, Saul develops this psychotic, murderous jealousy.
Saul literally threw spears at David's head while he was playing music for him.
Can you imagine? And that paranoia drove David into the wilderness. He spent years living as a fugitive in the desolate regions of Engedi and Ziph.
The psychological toll of that must have been staggering.
I mean, you are hiding in damp, dark caves, constantly looking over your shoulder.
Jumping at every snap twig.
Knowing that the most powerful man in the nation, a guy who commands a standing army, wants to mount your head on a pike, and you have done absolutely nothing to deserve it.
Imagine doing everything right at your job, only to watch the most corrupt, backstabbing colleague get the massive promotion and the corner office.
It's the ultimate workplace injustice, magnified to lethal proportions. But the betrayal goes even deeper than institutional injustice, doesn't it?
Yeah, the authors highlight the rebellion of his own son, Absalom.
Oh man, it's hard to even process the heartbreak of that. Your own flesh and blood.
Like a son you love deeply.
Right, orchestrating a highly sophisticated multi-year political campaign to steal the hearts of the people, stage a coup, take your throne, and put a bounty on your head.
And David has to flee his own capital city barefoot and weeping.
And it is during that chaotic, humiliating flight from Jerusalem that we see one of the most visceral moments of provocation in the entire biblical narrative.
Oh, you're talking about Shimei.
Yes, Shimei. This guy from the house of Saul comes out on the hillside above the road as David is trudging away into exile.
And he just starts hurling abuse.
Literally hurling stones. He's throwing heavy stones at David. He is throwing dirt.
And screaming vile curses, calling David a man of blood and a worthless fellow.
Just kicking him when he is at the absolute lowest point of his life. To put that in a modern context for you, the listener, imagine you are the CEO of a company.
Okay, yeah.
You've just been subjected to a hostile takeover orchestrated by your own child. You've been fired, your reputation is in ruins, your bank accounts are frozen.
Quickly rock bottom.
Right. And as you are carrying your cardboard box of personal items out to your car in the rain, a junior employee from a rival department comes out and starts throwing hot coffee at you.
Oh, what?
And screaming obscenities in front of the paparazzi. The humiliation is absolute.
And the list of betrayals doesn't even stop there. The commentaries bring up Ahithophel.
Oh, right, his counselor.
Yeah, Ahithophel was David's most trusted counselor. In the ancient world, his advice was considered so brilliant, so strategically flawless, that it was equated with the very oracle of God.
He was the guy you went to when you needed the perfect plan.
Exactly. He was David's confidant, his strategist, his close friend. And when Absalom launched his rebellion, Ahithophel committed the ultimate treason.
He defected.
He went to Absalom and immediately drafted the military strategy specifically designed to slaughter David before he could cross the Jordan River.
Institutional abuse from Saul. Public assault from Shimei. Deep personal treason from Ahithophel. Familial betrayal from Absalom.
If there was ever a human being who had the right to say, I am a victim, my anger is totally justified, and I am going to get my payback, it was King David.
But reading through the historical analysis, the most crucial detail isn't just that David suffered.
No, it's what he did with the power he had.
Exactly. It's that David consistently possessed the power to take violent vigilante action, and he actively restrained himself.
He wasn't a helpless victim who couldn't fight back.
Not at all. When he was hiding in the cave at Engedi, King Saul walked in alone to relieve himself. David's men were practically begging him to strike.
He even framed it spiritually, right?
Yes. They said, "This is the day the Lord has given your enemy into your hand." They were offering him the sword of immediate carnal vengeance.
And his generals were doing the exact same thing during the incident with Shimei.
Oh, Abishai.
Yeah, when Shimei was throwing stones, David's fierce military commander Abishai looked at the king and said, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and take off his head."
And it would have taken 30 seconds. Abishai was a highly trained killer, and Shimei was just some guy on a hill.
The sheer physical power to execute immediate justice was entirely at David's fingertips.
He had the shot, he had the justification, and he told his men to stand down. He told Abishai, "Let him alone and let him curse, for the Lord has bidden him."
David recognized that taking matters into his own hands, bypassing the justice of God for immediate vengeance, was basically a usurpation of the divine throne.
Which brings us directly into the broader cultural and theological crisis that forms the bedrock of Psalm 37.
Yeah, because to understand why anger was such an existential threat to the believer back then, the commentators take a deep dive into the ancient Near Eastern worldview.
Right, the idea of prosperity.
Exactly. In the ancient world, there was this universal, deeply ingrained assumption that prosperity equaled divine favor.
It was a one-to-one correlation.
Absolutely. If you were wealthy, if your crops yielded a massive harvest, if you were healthy and victorious in battle, it was empirical proof that the gods loved you.
And if you were poor or suffering, you were cursed.
Proof that the gods were actively cursing you. And it wasn't just the pagans who struggled with this.
No, because under the Old Covenant, the Mosaic and Davidic covenants, blessings and curses were often tied very specifically to the physical promised land.
Right. Obedience was supposed to bring rain in its season, massive harvests, peace from enemies.
And disobedience brought drought, famine, and exile. It was a very tangible earthly system of covenantal enforcement.
So imagine the cognitive dissonance, the sheer psychological trauma for a faithful Israelite living under that system.
Right. They are keeping the law. They are offering the sacrifices, dealing honestly in the marketplace. And yet, they are suffering.
They are being oppressed.
Meanwhile, they look across the street and see wicked, lawless, violent men who lie, cheat, and steal, accumulating massive wealth.
Taking over the best land and thriving without any apparent consequence. It shatters their entire paradigm.
It creates a massive crisis of faith. You do everything right and you get passed over.
The pagan nations around Israel would look at this dynamic and laugh.
They would say, look at your suffering. Your God, Yahweh, is either completely impotent or he just doesn't care about justice.
And for the Israelite witnessing this rampant, unpunished injustice, the temptation was intense. The text suggests they were pushed toward one of two catastrophic errors.
What was the first one?
The first was total apostasy, abandoning the faith entirely, throwing up their hands and saying, what is the point of being righteous? It doesn't pay off. I'm done.
And the second error?
The second error, which is the specific target of verse 8, was falling into violent vigilante rage.
The temptation to look at the wicked and say, if God won't stop them, I will. And I'll use their own ruthless tactics to do it.
Exactly.
But I can hear the listener pushing back right now because I was pushing back when I read this. Isn't some anger justified?
It's a fair question.
We look at the world today, we see human trafficking, we see corporate corruption that destroys thousands of pensions, political leaders blatantly lying to the public.
Yeah, real objective evil.
Right. So if David is seeing true objective injustice, why is he commanded to completely, totally drop his anger? Doesn't dropping your anger mean you're just rolling over and letting evil win?
That is the exact tension this entire psalm is engineered to address. The commentary is adamant that David is not advocating for a passive, blind eye toward evil.
Okay, that's a relief.
Right. The command to drop the anger is not about ignoring injustice. It is fundamentally about how the human soul processes the delay of justice.
The delay of justice, that's a great phrase.
And to really answer that question, we have to transition from the historical grit of David's life to the fascinating literary blueprint of the text itself.
The literary architecture. This was honestly one of the most surprising parts of the research for me.
Because David didn't just sit down and pour out a random stream of consciousness.
No. Our sources explain that Psalm 37 is a wisdom psalm, and it is meticulously structured as an acrostic poem.
Yeah. In the original Hebrew, successive stanzas of the psalm begin with the sequential letters of the Hebrew alphabet.
It starts with Aleph, moves to Beth, and goes all the way through to the final letter, Tav. It is an A to Z alphabetical progression.
And the verse we are focusing on, verse 8, falls precisely under the Hethstrophe.
My immediate question when I read that was, why? Was David just showing off his poetic skills? Was it just an ancient literary flex?
Not at all. In an oral culture, an acrostic served two very rigorous practical purposes. First, it was a vital mnemonic device.
Because they didn't have printing presses or digital notes.
Right. Massive, complex theological truths had to be memorized. The alphabetical structure was like a mental filing cabinet.
So when the heat of injustice flared up, the believer could mentally walk through the alphabet to recall their theological anchors.
Precisely. But second, and perhaps more importantly for our context, in Hebrew literature, an acrostic signaled a comprehensive, exhaustive treatment of a subject.
Like A to Z, literally.
Exactly. By going from Aleph to Tav, David is making a bold claim. He is saying, I am giving you the complete, definitive, authoritative manual on how the human soul must navigate the agonizing scandal of prosperous wickedness.
This isn't a loose collection of proverbs, it is a holistic survival guide.
Yes. And the internal structure of the ideas is just as intentional as the alphabetical letters.
The authors highlight a brilliant, undeniable progression in the opening verses. It's a deliberate pivot from positive commands to negative warnings.
Walk us through that.
So in verses 1 and 2, David starts with a negative prohibition. He says, "Do not fret because of evildoers, because they're going to wither like the grass."
They are temporary.
Right. They look permanent, but they are incredibly fragile. But then the text makes this fascinating pivot. In verses 3 through 6, David stops talking about the wicked entirely.
And he starts building what the commentators call an incredibly robust, positive fortress for the soul.
The fortress. I love that imagery. The verbs David deploys in this fortress section are highly active and demanding.
He tells the believer to trust in the Lord, to do good, to delight yourself in the Lord.
To commit your way to Him, and finally to rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him.
These are not passive suggestions for a quiet afternoon. They are rigorous, aggressive spiritual exercises. They require an immense output of spiritual energy.
It's like he's saying you can't just stand there in a void trying not to be angry. You have to actively build a different structure.
And then we hit the climax in verses 7 and 8.
Having laid out the positive fortress, David circles back to the negative warning, but the intensity completely skyrockets.
The text moves along a terrifying trajectory. It starts with internal agitation, what he calls fretting.
Then it escalates into an external explosion of anger and wrath.
And finally, it reaches the disastrous practical result, which is doing evil.
What's fascinating here is that this literary flow proves anger does not happen in a vacuum.
Right. It's not an isolated event.
Yeah.
It has a specific origin, a predictable progression, and an inevitable destination.
The commentators make a profound connection here. They say, if you are not actively engaging in the positive commands of the fortress,
if you are not actively trusting, actively committing your way to God, and resting in His providence,
your heart is completely, utterly defenseless against the temptation of resentment. It's the principle of displacement.
Nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. You cannot fight anger simply by clenching your fist and trying really hard not to be angry. If you leave the house of your mind empty of trust, the fire of resentment is going to move in and take over.
And to understand exactly how that fire operates, we need to look at the exact words David chose.
This brings us to a linguistic deep dive into the human heat. The exegetical analysis of verse 8 breaks the Hebrew down into 4 distinct clauses.
And honestly, seeing the original meaning behind these words completely changes how you read the verse.
It takes it from a mild suggestion to an urgent, life-saving intervention. Let's start with clause 1, the initial outburst. The phrase in our English Bibles is cease from anger. The original Hebrew phrase is harpel mi af.
Let's unpack the verb first. Harpel is a fascinating word. It's the imperative form of the root verb rapha.
And the commentators spend a significant amount of time clarifying what this word does not mean, right?
Yeah, it does not carry the passive, tranquil sense of peace like you would find in the Hebrew word shakat, which implies quietness or stillness.
Okay.
And it doesn't merely mean to casually stop an action, like the word shadel.
It's way more aggressive and physical than that.
Precisely. Because of the specific grammatical form David uses here, the verb implies an active, deliberate, and forceful action. It means to slacken, to let go, or to drop your grip.
Drop your grip, like dropping a weapon.
The imagery the commentators evoke is incredibly vivid. Picture a man whose knuckles are stark white because he is gripping a deadly weapon so tightly his hands are shaking.
Or someone pulling on a massive rope with every ounce of their strength, the tension threatening to snap it.
Right. The command harpel is the order to consciously, deliberately uncurl your fingers and drop the weapon to the dirt. Let the rope go slack.
And what exactly are we dropping? We are dropping our af. The lexical analysis here is just wild.
It is. The sources point out that af literally translates to nostril or face.
Nostril, like flaring nostrils.
Yes. In Hebrew thought, human emotion is deeply tied to physical physiology.
That makes total sense. When a human being experiences a sudden, explosive loss of temper, your heart rate spikes. Adrenaline floods your bloodstream.
Your breathing becomes heavy and rapid,
Right.
and your nostrils literally flare.
It is the instantaneous snap reaction. It is the physiological manifestation of rage.
It's what happens when someone aggressively cuts you off in traffic and almost causes a wreck.
Or when you read an infuriating, slanderous headline about someone you respect. The blood rushes to your face.
Charles Spurgeon, the famous 19th century preacher, whom the sources quote extensively on this point, described this specific kind of anger as a temporary madness.
Temporary madness. It completely dethrones reason. It hijacks your prefrontal cortex.
So David is saying, drop the weapon of that initial, physical, unthinking rage immediately. Do not hold on to the flaring nostril.
But he doesn't stop there, because human anger rarely stops at the initial outburst.
No, it morphs. It settles in.
Which brings us to clause 2, settled malice. The English says forsake wrath. The Hebrew is va'azov chemah.
The verb azov means to forsake, to abandon utterly, to leave destitute. You turn your back on it and walk away.
But the noun it is attached to, chemah, is a deeply profound and terrifying word.
The commentary unpacks this beautifully. If af is the quick temper, the sudden flare-up that burns hot and fast,
then chemah is the settled, venomous heat.
yes, it is a slow-burning, highly toxic rage. It is the anger that has moved past the initial shock and settled deep into the bones.
The sources make a chilling connection here. They note that this exact Hebrew word, chemah, is used elsewhere in the biblical text, specifically in Psalm 58.4 to describe the poison of serpents.
The poison of serpents. Let that sink in.
Poison doesn't usually kill you the second it enters your body.
Right, it circulates. It slowly shuts down your nervous system, your respiratory system, your vital organs.
That is exactly what chemah does to the human soul. It is the grudge you actively nurse in your chest.
It is the resentment you feed and comfort every single night before you go to sleep.
It is the anger that has digested the initial injury and synthesized it into deep-seated malice. Af might naturally fade when your adrenaline drops, but chemah is the poison you keep willfully drinking.
Hoping that the other person is the one who dies.
Exactly. It's the mental ledger where you keep a meticulous record of every time they wronged you. And David's command is absolute. You must entirely abandon it.
Desert it. Leave it behind like a toxic waste dump because it is actively killing you.
Which leads right into clause 3, the internal furnace. The Hebrew is al-titchar, translated as fret not yourself.
And reading the analysis of this clause might be the most convicting part of the entire deep dive. It truly exposes the root of the problem.
How so?
Well, al-titchar uses the negative particle, meaning do not, followed by a very rare reflexive verb form of the root kara, which means to burn or be kindled.
Reflexive meaning?
The reflexive nature of the grammar is the key to everything here. It means the action is something the subject is doing to themselves. It translates literally to do not inflame yourself.
Wow. This completely upends how we casually talk about anger. We talk about catching anger or losing our temper as if it's a rogue virus we accidentally picked up on the subway.
Or a set of car keys we misplaced. We frame ourselves as passive victims of our own emotions.
You made me so mad. The situation just made me angry.
But David, through this reflexive verb, is exposing the massive lie in that narrative. We are not passive victims. We actively fan our own flames.
We are the ones who stand in the shower having imaginary arguments with our boss, coming up with a perfect, devastating comeback.
We are the ones who continuously obsess over the injustice, replaying the memory like a movie trailer.
We are deliberately feeding the fire.
The commentators point out a fascinating historical detail regarding this. When the Hebrew Old Testament was translated into ancient Greek, the Septuagint, the scholars chose the Greek phrase mo paroxenu for this clause.
And what does that mean?
That phrase means do not allow yourself to be provoked or exasperated. It strongly implies an internal permission, an internal consent you give to the anger.
You are actively participating in the architecture of your own emotional destruction.
And if you participate in that destruction, you will inevitably, without fail, arrive at clause 4, the inevitable destination.
The English reads in any wise to do evil. The Hebrew is akh-lehare'a.
This final clause features an infinitive verb, ra, which means to do evil, to cause harm, or to act wickedly.
But the word that carries the most devastating weight in the sentence is the tiny restrictive particle that precedes it, ah.
It translates to only, surely, or certainly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. That word only is an absolute absolute. It shuts down every single excuse we try to manufacture.
Because when we are consumed by chemah, by that serpent poison, we tell ourselves a very compelling story.
We tell ourselves that our anger is righteous. We tell ourselves that our outrage is going to fix the problem, that it's going to achieve justice.
This is going to balance the scales.
But the ancient text looks at us and says, unholy human anger leads only to evil. It never produces the righteousness of God.
It never produces ultimate justice. It only ever makes you resemble the very wicked people you are so passionately angry at.
That is the tragic, inescapable irony of unmortified anger. In your burning zeal to oppose evildoers, your unrestrained rage inevitably turns you into one.
You slowly adopt their methods, you start cutting corners.
You start lying, you start slandering your opponents, acting ruthlessly, all under the supposedly noble banner of a righteous cause.
You become the monster you set out to slay.
When you look at these four clauses together, it's exactly like the analogy of the house fire we talked about earlier. Clause 1, that flaring nostril, that's the sudden, unexpected spark in the wiring.
Clause 2, chemah, the settled poison, those are the toxic, smoldering coals hidden deep in the walls that you don't even see burning.
Clause 3, titchar, inflaming yourself. That is you, the homeowner, standing in the middle of your own living room, pouring gallons of gasoline on yourself by obsessing over the wrong.
And clause 4, al-titchar, that is the house inevitably, unavoidably burning to the ground, destroying you and everyone around you.
It is a perfect synthesis of the exegetical structure. It is a terrifying stair-step descent into moral and spiritual ruin.
And the paramount question the commentators ask next is, how do you stop the descent?
Right. How do we actually stop it?
The answer they provide is that you cannot stop it by merely looking inward. You have to look outside the burning house entirely. We have to look at the theological ground.
Which brings us to the ultimate conflict of the text. Providence versus practical unbelief. We've seen the destructive path of anger. But how do we drop the weapon when every natural instinct is screaming at us to strike back?
The sources make a bold claim here. They say the answer isn't psychological, it's deeply theological. It's about recognizing who is actually sitting on the throne of the universe.
Because when we harbor deep, settled anger, we are making a profound, articulate theological statement, even if we never say it out loud.
The authors argue that nursing wrath is fundamentally a denial of God's providence. It is acting on the functional assumption that God is either blind to the injustice occurring, incapable of dealing with it due to weakness, or just failing to execute justice on our preferred timeline.
So, because we think God is dropping the ball, we decide we have to step in. We set up a courtroom in our own minds.
We climb into the judge's chair, we swear ourselves in as the jury, and we appoint ourselves the executioner.
We are attempting to seize the throne of heaven.
Exactly. The commentaries lean heavily on historic Reformed theology here, referencing the Westminster Confession of Faith, specifically chapter 5, which deals with the doctrine of providence.
And what does that chapter articulate?
It articulates that God, the great creator of all things, upholds, directs, disposes, and governs all creatures, actions, and things, from the greatest even to the least, by his most wise and holy providence.
So nothing is outside of his sovereign rule. Not the rogue king, not the traitorous counselor, not the corrupt co-worker.
Therefore, we do not need to seize his throne. We don't need to force history to bend to our will through carnal explosive rage, because history is already being perfectly governed by a righteous judge.
But I have to ask this on behalf of everyone listening, because it is the most natural, visceral pushback. If I'm supposed to drop my anger because God is in control, does that mean I am just supposed to adopt a kind of passive, weak sentimentalism?
Yeah, the false binary.
Right. Do I just plaster a fake smile on my face, ignore systemic evil, and say, well, God's in control, so I won't do anything about this abuse? Does dropping our anger mean we are required to become doormats for the wicked?
It is absolutely crucial to address that, and the commentators are explicit and forceful on this point. No. Meekness is not weakness.
Thank goodness.
It is not moral confusion. It is not cowardice in the face of evil. True biblical meekness is disciplined strength. It is the immense power to refuse to answer evil with evil.
It is trusting God enough to act righteously without needing to act vindictively.
The opposite error of passive sentimentalism is what the sources provocatively call baptized rage.
Baptized rage, that is quite the phrase, putting a holy, sanctified label on our entirely unholy temper.
It is the incredibly dangerous habit of excusing our sinful, vicious, destructive passions simply because our cause happens to be objectively righteous.
It's saying, because I am fighting a real evil, the rules of Christian charity and restraint no longer apply to me.
But the text does not say we shouldn't care about justice. It says we shouldn't fret ourselves to do evil in the pursuit of it. We cannot use the devil's tools to build God's house.
And the reason the believer can exercise this disciplined strength, the reason they can drop the weapon, is because of the concrete promise attached to it.
David repeats this refrain throughout the entire psalm. Evildoers will be cut off, but those who wait upon the Lord, the meek, shall inherit the earth.
Inherit the land. To an ancient Israelite, land was everything. It was life, security, covenantal identity, and future.
And Jesus echoes this exact verbatim promise centuries later in the Sermon on the Mount, in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth.
The profound paradigm-shifting point the sources make here is that we do not need to imitate the ruthless, cutthroat, bloody tactics of the wicked to secure our future.
Why? Because our future isn't a piece of territory we have to violently seize in a turf war. It is an inheritance freely and irrevocably given to us by the righteous judge.
Think about the psychology of an heir. A true heir who knows their father's will is ironclad does not need to get into a fistfight with a squatter over the estate.
The deed is already in their name. The inheritance is guaranteed by the highest court.
If you truly believe the inheritance is guaranteed by God, the frantic, angry, white-knuckled clawing for control loses its power over you.
You can afford to wait. You can afford to be still. You can afford to drop the weapon.
Which perfectly transitions us to how this actually gets accomplished in human history. Because let's be honest, King David wrote these beautiful words, but he failed at times.
He was a deeply flawed man who sometimes gave in to his worst impulses.
The commands of Psalm 37 point us to a standard that no mere human can perfectly maintain. But the sources point us to the ultimate fulfillment of this psalm.
We find it not in the first David, but in the ultimate son of David. We have to look at the Christological fulfillment.
This is where the theology moves from a crushing moral command to a liberating gospel hope.
The sources argue comprehensively that Jesus Christ is the perfect, flawless, historical embodiment of Psalm 37, verse 8. He is the sinless second Adam who succeeded in the exact wilderness where we continually fail.
Think about the historical reality of Christ's earthly ministry. No human being in the history of the world has ever faced more profound, systemic, coordinated, and vicious injustice than Jesus of Nazareth.
The commentators list out the trials to emphasize the scale of the provocation. He faced the corrupt, illegal midnight religious courts of the Sanhedrin, where false witnesses were openly bribed to lie about him.
He was handed over to the secular authorities, where he was mocked, beaten, and dressed up in a purple robe as a cruel joke by Herod's soldiers.
He was intimately betrayed with a kiss by his own disciple Judas, a man he had shared meals with for 3 years.
And finally, he was condemned to a torturous death by the cowardly political expediency of Pontius Pilate, a judge who literally declared him innocent moments before sentencing him to the cross.
And yet, through all of that unprecedented, agonizing provocation, he perfectly fulfilled the command, Harpel miaf, drop the wrath.
He was, as the prophet Isaiah foretold, the sheep that is silent before her shearers.
The Apostle Peter, who watched this happen, wrote that when Christ was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he threatened not.
He didn't plot revenge, he didn't burn with internal malice, he didn't call down legions of angels to incinerate his enemies, though he had the absolute authority to do so.
Instead, Peter says, he entrusted himself entirely to him who judges righteously. He lived out the ultimate trust in divine providence.
He suffered the ultimate injustice without ever retaliating. He broke the cycle of human vengeance completely. But reading the theological analysis, the weight of this goes far deeper than Jesus merely being a really good example of emotional restraint.
We aren't just supposed to look at Jesus and say, wow, he stayed so calm. I should try to be more calm like him.
The mechanism of our salvation is tied up in this. The sources point out that Jesus didn't just model dropping the anger, he actually absorbed it.
This is the very core of the historic gospel message. On the cross, Jesus didn't just endure human injustice. He absorbed the infinite holy chemah, the righteous, burning, unmitigated wrath of God against human sin.
Every outburst of selfish temper we've ever had, every bitter grudge we've secretly nursed, every time we fanned the flames of our own resentment and sought our own vengeance, that unholy anger was an offense against a holy God.
It deserved the holy indignation of the Creator. But that divine wrath was poured out entirely upon Christ at Calvary. He drank the cup of God's justice down to the dregs so that we wouldn't have to.
The commentators reference the Westminster Confession again here, specifically chapter 8, section 5, highlighting that Christ fully satisfied the justice of his Father through his perfect obedience and sacrifice.
This fundamentally, biologically almost, rewires how you view your own right to be angry.
It really does. It changes the mechanism of the human heart. If God the Father, the righteous judge of the universe, was willing to pour out his wrath on his own beloved Son in order to forgive my massive debts, how can I possibly turn around and aggressively choke my neighbor over a minor offense?
How can you hold on to your petty, venomous chemah when Christ absorbed the infinite cosmic chemah for you. It obliterates the foundation of our self-righteousness.
It completely bankrupts our right to vengeance, but simultaneously, it secures our hope for the future.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources touch on the eschatological reality here, the doctrine of the end times and final judgment.
From a redemptive historical perspective, Christ is not just the suffering servant. He is the true coming king.
We read in texts like Revelation 19 that he will return in absolute glory, not as a silent lamb, but as a conquering king to execute perfect, final, and inescapable judgment upon the earth.
He is coming back to set all things right. No injustice will slip through the crack.
No corrupt politician, no abusive spouse, no fraudulent CEO will escape the final audit.
And because he is coming to execute perfect justice, believers do not need to burn with carnal rage today.
We don't have to bear the crushing psychological burden of trying to force a utopia through angry human willpower. The true Davidic king guarantees that final justice will be done.
Our waiting is not in vain. Our stillness is not a surrender to evil. It is a profound declaration of faith in the returning king.
So we have this rich, ancient wisdom from David's life. We have the structural and linguistic depth of the Hebrew text. And we have this profound reality of Christ's work on the cross.
The vital question we have to answer now is application. How does this confront the reality we actually live in today? How do we take a 3,000-year-old psalm and use it to survive the modern outrage machine?
Both privately in the quiet of our homes and publicly in the chaos of our culture.
Exactly.
Well, the commentators apply this text like a finely sharpened double-edged sword. And they begin where true reform always must begin, with deeply personal, agonizing heart examination.
The text demands that we take a long, hard look in the mirror before we ever dare to look at the culture out the window.
And I want to ask you, the listener, the exact questions our sources pose, because they are incredibly penetrating. Are you secretly storing up grievances as ammunition against your spouse?
Meticulously filing away their past failures, just waiting for the next argument to unload them and win the fight.
Are you disciplining your children not out of a desire for their holiness, but in moments of uncontrolled explosive fury because they inconvenienced you?
Is your local church community characterized by quiet, toxic whispering campaigns, factions, and passive-aggressive grudges?
The text commands us to stop, to confess that anger as the sin of practical unbelief, to mortify it, and to seek forgiveness at the cross.
We cannot righteously protest the burning cities of our culture if we are happily tolerating smoldering coals in our own living rooms.
It is a prerequisite for public witness. And once the personal heart is examined, the sources do turn their attention outward, engaging in a severe, sweeping cultural critique.
And here, we need to be very clear and precise about what the texts provided to us are arguing. The authors of our sources strongly argue against modern secular grievance culture.
Yeah, they explicitly name and analyze frameworks like critical race theory and intersectionality.
And as we walk through this section, it's fascinating how the commentators take this ancient biblical category of fretting to do evil and apply it directly to modern sociology.
The commentary asserts that these modern sociopolitical frameworks are, at their core, Marxist-derived philosophies. And the defining characteristic of these philosophies, according to the sources, is that they are built entirely on perpetual grievance, systemic resentment, and class warfare.
The sources argue that these ideologies do not offer a mechanism for forgiveness or ultimate reconciliation. Instead, they encourage people to define their core identity by their past injuries or their group's historical marginalization.
They require adherents to continually stoke the fires of systemic resentment, utilizing public outrage and targeted anger as the primary engine for gaining political power.
And the authors draw a hard line here. They conclude that believers must explicitly, totally, and unapologetically reject these frameworks. Why? Because of Clause 4 of our verse, akh-lehare'a.
Human anger, no matter how noble or historically grounded the political banner it flies under, leads only to do evil.
The sources make the definitive argument that you simply cannot build the peaceful kingdom of God on the radioactive embers of human bitterness.
A system that requires constant outrage to function is fundamentally at odds with a kingdom that requires the dropping of wrath.
Furthermore, the commentary doesn't just attack secular ideologies, it turns its sights on dangerous trends within the church itself. It strongly pushes back against two specific errors, pragmatism and mysticism.
Let's define those clearly for the listener. Pragmatism in the church will be looking at the culture and saying, well, using anger and outrage clearly gets results.
It drives voter turnout, it skyrockets fundraising, it gets retweets and clicks.
Since it's an effective tool, We should use it for righteous causes. But the biblical text looks at that pragmatic approach and says, absolutely not. It only produces evil.
The ends do not justify the unholy means. The pragmatist believes anger is a tool they can master. The text says anger is a master that will destroy the tool.
The second error is the mystical error. This would be counseling someone who is deeply struggling with deep-seated malice by telling them they just need to seek an ecstatic vision.
Or a special private revelation, or some sort of immediate charismatic deliverance experience to instantly zap the anger out of their heart without any effort on their part.
But the sources, drawing once again on the robust theology of the Westminster Confession, specifically Chapter 1, Section 10, argue for what the Reformed tradition calls the ordinary means of grace.
They state that the true, lasting path to putting sin to death, to mortifying the chemah in your chest, isn't found in a magic trick.
It is found in the steady, faithful preaching of the Word. It is found in solemn, agonizing prayer.
It is found in the daily reading of Scripture and the faithful participation in the sacraments. It's the daily reliance on the Holy Spirit through the ordinary means God has already provided to his people.
Which brings us to a vital final clarification regarding what the theologians call lawful opposition. Because again, dropping your personal anger does not mean abandoning the truth.
Or surrendering the public square to the wicked. The sources are incredibly careful to state that surrendering personal, vindictive vengeance does not mean denying objective facts, and it does not mean removing appropriate protective boundaries.
We can, and we absolutely should, still act in the world. Dropping the weapon of malice does not mean dropping the shield of truth.
We can vote for righteous policies that protect human flourishing. We can organize and mobilize to protect the vulnerable.
We can establish firm, uncompromising boundaries in abusive relationships to protect the innocent. Magistrates, judges, and parents can and must exercise lawful, measured discipline without being consumed by personal hatred.
You can be politically and culturally engaged without making your political opponents the object of personal, venomous hatred.
You can be unwaveringly firm without being vicious. You can be deeply courageous without being cruel.
The profound, liberating truth the sources leave us with is this. Truth does not need our lies, our hyperbole, or our vitriol to defend it.
And justice does not need our personal bitter vengeance to complete it. The kingdom of Jesus Christ simply does not advance by sanctified bitterness.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive by talking about an invisible fire, a silent conflagration burning down the house of the mind.
What we've discovered through the life of David, the Hebrew text, and the cross of Christ is that Psalm 37.8 isn't just offering us breathing exercises to calm down.
It is a sovereign, divine imperative. It is a direct order from the King of Kings to consciously, deliberately drop the weapon of explosive, flaring anger.
It is a command to utterly abandon and desert the settled, venomous poison of deep-seated bitterness.
And it is a severe warning to stop fanning the flames of our own internal agitation, because relying on human anger will only ever produce more evil.
It is, at its absolute core, a call to radical, unnerving trust. It asks us to take the immense emotional energy we currently spend on fretting and plotting and to forcefully redirect it entirely into trusting the providence of God.
Doing tangible good in our communities and waiting patiently for the ultimate, perfect justice that Christ will bring when he returns. As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
It's building on a brilliant phrase from our commentary sources. Hope cools the fever of resentment.
So I want you to think about this as you go about your week. If your default reaction to the evening news, or to the deeply frustrating coworker, or to the family member who pushes your buttons.
If your immediate reflex reaction is a burning, self-righteous, frantic outrage.
Is it possible that your functional, everyday theology is actually one where God is absent? Not just delayed, but functionally, completely missing from the throne of the universe.
If we truly deeply believed that the sovereign judge of all the earth was currently reigning, that he saw every injustice, and that he would flawlessly make all things right, wouldn't our resting heart rate look profoundly different?
That is the ultimate diagnostic question for the human soul. If we genuinely believe the house is owned, insured, and secured by God Almighty, we will finally stop pouring gasoline on the floorboards.
We really will.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive on Reformed thinking. We invite you to keep questioning the world around you, keep learning from the inexhaustible depth of the Word, and most importantly, keep trusting the sovereign God who holds it all.